Welcome to MSP 1337. I'm your host, Chris Johnson, a show dedicated to cybersecurity challenges, solutions, a journey together, not alone. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of MSP 1337. I'm joined this week by Jeff Borello of Andromeda Technology Solutions. Jeff, welcome to the show.
Chris, thanks for having me.
So each week, we take on differing topics around cybersecurity. And this week, I think it would be a great opportunity to talk about your client portfolio, not so much your client specifically, unless you want to talk about a specific client, but to talk about what it means to provide services into a lot of what I would consider to be clients that don't have the regulatory requirements imposed upon them, and maybe treat security a little bit less reactive, or say maybe more reactive than intentional or proactive per se. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I would say that's very indicative of what we see out there, unfortunately.
So I think it'd be good. So I know that there are several major categories that you work with. You mentioned having to go through the 800-171, which is a great framework, I think, for assessing a cybersecurity posture within any organization. And so I'd be curious, to just hear a little bit about your journey around pursuing the 800-171, why that was important to you, because obviously I would assume that has something to do with insurance or clients. And let's just start there, and then we can dive into maybe how some of the clients that you do work with have shaped your focus on cybersecurity.
Yeah, so the NIST 800-171 journey, we started about 18 months ago, call it. Little bit of a push from our insurance company, a little bit of us just wanting to be out and ahead of the security world, right? So we're
Sure.
always telling our clients that security is first and it needs to be first and foremost. So we needed to be walking the talk, I guess, so to speak. So we said, yeah, let's get our house in order, and make sure we have all our ducks in a row, and then we can, start leading the charge for some of our clients. And, ultimately, I think down the road, 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, I think you're going to see everybody needing to have some level of compliance to a security framework. And I think this is going to get driven a lot by the cyber insurance industry, right? They're taking a beating. They're getting to this place where they don't want to even insure people. And if they do, the rates are up through the roof. So I think we're going to see a lot of this get pushed out by the insurance companies. And even those that are not in some regulatory situation are going to need to adhere to a framework. So we wanted to be in a position to be able to do that for our clients, and be ready to do it when it was needed.
Yeah, with that, it makes me think that maybe we should talk about pursuing the GTIA cybersecurity trust mark, but that's a conversation for another maybe another episode.
Yeah.
It's ironic that you said though about the insurance. So the cybersecurity trust mark, if you're not familiar with it, it's basically built around CIS Top 18 with elements pulled in from other frameworks to help balance out things like governance. And then when we went to go live with it, we discovered that we should probably make sure that the questions that come out of insurance questionnaires are also being satisfied. And one of the takeaways that we had from that, and maybe your experience is similar, is an insurance questionnaire will ask you a question that is actually 10 questions in one question. And
Yeah.
the only answer they're looking for is yes or no, not
Yep.
but, right?
Yep.
And so our challenge, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, is seeing things like, do you have MFA? Well, MFA on what?
Yeah.
And we saw that, you're in the Midwest, so you're probably very familiar with the traveler's insurance debacle, where the insurance paid out and then later basically sued to get the money back because, well, they hadn't quite done what was implied across all areas that should have MFA. So I was curious, going through 800-171, you talked about your insurance. Were there some things that you ran into that were eye-openers as you were going through 800-171 that you hadn't considered that were tied largely to those questions?
That's a good question. And you hit the nail on the head too with these, and this is why people don't like to fill out these forms, because they're either, I don't know if they're intentionally vague but there are certainly some vague questions that, yeah, we take exception to every year when we fill ours out. It's like, I can't answer this question. It's not a yes or no question. The security frameworks, there's a lot there, right? And some of it's probably more helpful and critical than others. And there's some areas that are probably not a big deal. But certainly we see a lot of alignment between the framework itself and the questions on the cyber insurance forms. And I
Sure.
think they are in a lot of cases the same, or one leverages the other. But I would say there was, certain areas that we said, yeah, we were probably living the spirit of things on the insurance form. But by taking a few extra, two, three extra steps, we could really nail it down and really say, okay, we know we're solid here, as opposed to just kind of hitting the spirit of it.
Gathering evidence, I think, is the one that I always seem to run into. Is you can articulate the yes, we're doing this, and then I ask
Yeah.
for evidence, and you're like, I'm going to need a couple days. And
Yeah.
and that's fair, right? Because you don't get asked for evidence every day. So sometimes the ask itself is like, oh, yeah, I need to produce some evidence in order for you to believe that I am actually, doing this. That's a fair question.
Yeah.
So obviously, insurance questionnaire is driving it. I think you're right. I think we're going to see over the next, I would give it a year. I think we're still on the tipping point of insurance providers understanding well enough to look for, like you said, the evidence. So they can ask the questions. They've cherry picked from different frameworks, or even we're seeing more and more as similarities across the questions being asked,
Yeah.
regardless of what framework was used. But one thing that I haven't seen is the consistency around what they're looking for in the answers, right? So to your point of you're taking an exception to something, how do you know you get coverage, but you're like, I said no to that, or I put an exception there, and you're like, did I get coverage?
Yeah.
Am I
Right.
good? Did you run into that where you had to like actually talk to a broker or an agent and just say, hey, we're not sure about these things. Can you walk us through it?
No, but generally we will, we may answer yes or no. But then where there's a comment section, we will say, we'll clarify like, hey, I said yes, but this, that, and the
Sure.
other. And let them come back and ask us about it if they want. Part of it is just trying to be as honest as possible. And,
Right.
there's no benefit to anybody to trying to stretch the truth, or you just, and listen, areas that we are not, for whatever reason, there's a couple areas that we cannot do for whatever reason. And we just say, no, we're not, we can't adhere to this. Here's why.
Sure.
And then, but we're always open to having a conversation about it. But, I do
Yeah.
think your, your, your comment was dead on. Being able to provide the evidence for things is really where the rubber meets the road. I think that really is a very big difference between an insurance questionnaire and following a security framework, because it really takes it to that next level where someone says, yeah, we're doing this. Fine. Show me. It's
So I,
almost
I
show me.
love,
It's almost show me versus tell me, right?
yeah, and I think actions speak louder than words, right?
Hmm.
So it's interesting about what you said. I think that in coming into this conversation, we see this a lot in our industry of providing IT services, and it's like how to do more with less, how to increase our profit margins, and everybody needs to be selling cybersecurity services. And what you said, I think, is paramount because instead of looking at it through the lens of how do I make more money or how do I keep my clients that want me to do compliance, you looked at it through the lens of like if I don't do these things, I'm in no position to sell or deliver services around these things. So I liked it. I think you picked perhaps one of the tougher of the frameworks to go through. That's a lot of evidence gathering, if you will.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, as you went client facing, having put that effort in, what are you seeing with your clients that maybe prior to having that 800 171 was getting into the areas of like, well, uh, we're not doing this, and they're asking me to do this. Are they doing this? Are they doing the things that they're asking of you that led you to go through 800 171? How did that change when you're like, I can now be an authority to my clients on we have implemented, and now quite honestly looking at you the client going, wait a second, you made us go through these hoops and we're realizing the importance and the value of that, but show me your evidence.
Yeah, I think a lot of it, certainly in the last couple of years, it's been increasing, but we don't get a lot of requests around those. I mean, we've had, can you show me your incident response plan or
Sure.
your business continuity plan? Um, but I think up until like the last month, I'm not sure anyone has asked us for enough where we would actually need to provide some like a summary level of the framework of what we're doing. It's generally been kind of very piecemeal. And I think
Sure.
a lot of that is just so much of the world is behind in the security, right? They think it's not going to happen to us. We're too small. All the stuff we hear all the time. Um, we're still one of the things we've been pushing, and it's actually in our legal agreement with clients is, they have to have a standalone cybersecurity policy. And it's amazing how many people we still talk to who don't. Um, it's just, it's like not a reality until something happens. And
Sure.
then it's a whole different story, right?
They
Um,
find out that the insurance they do have is not what is needed for what they need coverage for, right?
yeah. Yeah, and ultimately the customer's responsible for filling out their assessment with their insurance company. But I think in a lot of cases, they're really struggling to answer them appropriately to be able to get coverage because security is still fairly lax out there, which explains, why there's ransomware events every day and everything's in the news, and it's just still not taken seriously to the level that it needs to be.
Do you run into with your clients who have insurance where they have filled out the questionnaire and didn't bother to consider your input on what answers they were putting down?
Not that I know of. I think most clients would, because they know they don't know the answers. So as
Sure,
far as I know, most people are, they submit the app to us. We answer the questions that we can, and then basically give it back to them to finish off because we're very clear that we are not responsible for the final answers on this, right? This is your
sure.
policy. It's your answers, but they generally need some help from us, and we're happy to do that.
Yeah, I mean, you're providing services in that from a responsibility of implementation, you guys are taking on, hence the client relationship. But the thing that always floors me is their unwillingness to recognize that they're still accountable for the
Yeah.
answers that they're giving back to the insurance provider or to the regulatory body. It never gets old. You're like, but you wrote with your pen and signed your name at the bottom of this. This does not
Right.
include me, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm here to give you some guidance on what we're doing, but ultimately, yeah, it's their responsibility. And that's the funny thing about IT. People would never do that with their accounting and their financials, right? Um, but somehow the IT, it's this, it's people are still treating it as an expense and not as a leverageable, investment. And I think they think,
Sure.
yeah, it's the IT guys here. This is IT stuff. This is your domain, not mine. And I think that's part of the reason you see a lot of the, either not paying enough attention to security or just generally not paying enough attention to your IT because it's just
Sure.
this thing I have to deal with as opposed to understanding how to leverage it.
Yeah, and technology has gotten easier to implement, right? So you can, and I don't mean necessarily good technology, but as a layman in the technology world we live in, if I need an application to solve a problem, I can probably do a search for it, and either I get the tool that I think I need, good, bad, or otherwise, or I can probably get a AI type functionality and have it build it for me, some sort of
Yep.
automation, things like that, right? So I'm just curious, especially knowing that you cater into the manufacturing space. Do you run into a lot of like shadow? I don't call it shadow IT. I think that's an unfair statement because I think that's more of like in the world of intentional avoiding,
Yeah.
having to call the IT guy. This is more of like efficiency, productivity. How do I get things done without bothering somebody?
Yeah.
Do you run into like a had no idea these apps were running or that they are in a category that we shouldn't be using when you come into an environment like that?
Yeah, for sure. And one of the things we've done over the last couple of years is we've introduced a new security tool in our stack that basically so people can't just run around installing apps, right? Because it is, like you said, applications are just ubiquitous. You can get an application to do anything you want, you load it up, you do its thing, right? So, and not that we're trying to
Global
lock down
domain
their
admin
environment.
requirements. What?
Yeah, exactly. We even saw it here at our company, right? We said, hey, we're trying to get a handle on all the vendors we have, and there's all kinds of ones that we know about that are centrally managed, that are paid for through the company. But then you start looking around and asking or run a tool, and there's a lot of applications that people have gotten on their own, right? Maybe not even necessarily paying for it, but they got it through their Gmail address or whatever, and it's on the
Sure.
system and it's doing its thing. So I think that's a big deal. And I think the solution that is you've got to have zero trust systems set up that people can't install it without getting some sort of a prior approval. So somebody at least
Yeah,
looks at
at
it.
least a second
And
level of like eyes on to make sure that it's like, no, that's not Dropbox. You thought it was Dropbox, but it's
yeah,
definitely not Dropbox.
yep, yeah. And again, it's just so easy to get whatever you want now. And I think there is this level of there is a perception that IT has gotten easier because I have an iPhone and it updates itself and I load applications and why do I need to pay you to patch?
Sure.
And there's this, it's caused a lack of appreciation, I think, for the level of complexity that has gotten more complex, not less, between cloud environments and on-prem and hybrid and trying to move data back and forth. It's the environment's actually gotten a lot more complex, not less.
Yeah, do you think that that's tied in any way, shape, or form to the lack of understanding of, my data? I think about like we saw this take place here recently with the ban on TikTok, right? And
Yeah.
suddenly the option was to switch to whatever it was called, Red Note, and the privacy policy isn't even in English, and yet you have millions of people switching without any consideration to what would happen or what is happening or can happen to their data or what it has access to. And I had a conversation the other day with a teenager who said, I don't care. I don't have any data that's important, and they can't do anything anyways to my device because, and I said, because why? Because why? What makes you think they can't do something to your device? And so, like the look on this individual's face was priceless because in their mind, it was only what the app allowed data from the app out, not what
Uh,
access that app has to the device. And I think I'm curious your thoughts on this. Like we find applications to solve problems. Do you think any of them are asking questions like, what problems does this create?
no, not at all. I think, and Chris, it was your son, right? You can say, no, I'm kidding. Uh,
I've had conversations like that with my son. This particular case was not.
not, yeah, I think it's just ubiquitous. I have this device I can load up anything I want. No, I don't think anybody even gives it a second thought these days. It, yeah,
And it jumps generations, right? This isn't like the baby boomers to the Gen Zs having. We're all in agreement. We'll give data away freely because we
right.
don't recognize the value of the data or
Yeah.
understand how that data can be accessed from our alleged quote secure devices.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really frightening when you think about it, just the lack of understand, I mean, even, I'm in, I'm as technical as anybody I know. I'm in the tech world. But sure, you get an app, they put an agreement in front of you. It's impossible to read them. Couldn't possibly read them to
Sure,
understand it, right?
we
So,
can't afford the
yeah,
legal counsel that needs to read it.
right. Yeah. So I think that's just and you're right. And the data is the most powerful thing there is now. People's private data it's everything. I mean, it's really kind of a scary situation we've gotten ourselves into that people don't think about that.
Yeah, and I would argue at this point, I'm not sure that any of us have data that is still private. I think we're quite kind of at that point where if you haven't gotten a letter in the mail, it's just a matter of days before you get one that says, "Oh, back in 2024, sorry about that.
No
Here's some
question.
monitoring for you."
Yeah. Yeah, it's and that's the exact stance I take. I just assume everything's out there. One of the things we started doing here recently was we started recording a lot of our calls, and so we can review them and do some training with our. And people are like, "Wow, is that going to be like people going to balk at that?" I'm like, pay attention. You're like half the calls you're on are recorded these days. I
Right.
just assume everybody's listening to everything you put out there. Somebody's going to get a hold of it, and it's you definitely got to take the right steps and safeguards to do what you can to protect it. But yeah, this concept of data privacy, I think, is long since gone.
Yeah, I would argue that if you want to have a private conversation, you probably should leave your technical devices in a Faraday cage or far away from you where the microphones don't pick that up, and then go somewhere that there are no technology devices to have
Yeah.
that quote secure conversation.
Yep. I mean, I was just talking about this the other day. I mean, think about this, the helicopter crash into the airplane. There was so many videos of that. Now, not like somebody knew that was going to happen and was out there videoing it. It's like there are so many cameras and so many recording devices out in the world.
Yeah.
You just have to assume that it's like there's everything gets picked up on a camera somewhere. It's really kind of mind-boggling when you think about it.
Yeah, that would have been concerning if it was camera footage from a drone, but yeah, there was
Yeah.
plenty of video footage for that, and we see this elsewhere too, right? Like you look at like surveillance cameras in other countries, and it's just par for the course that you're
Yeah.
always on camera, and we get wrapped around the axle here in the States about, giving permission to be on camera, and yet we don't have a we don't say anything about giving our data to, nation states or,
Yeah.
really anybody. Like, oh wait, I can get a coupon for that. All I had to put my
Yeah.
email address in and my date of birth, and I get free whatever. Like, but if you look at it through the other lens, how many other countries would allow us to do the same thing? Like, hey, I'm going to send this to Italy or France. I got this cool app. All that I require, it's free. All that we require is that for those that install this app, all of the data that we grab off that phone, we're going to suck up and bring it back here to the States. Would
Yeah.
never happen.
Correct. Yeah. It really is a different perspective on things.
So you're largely dealing with clients like we were talking about earlier that don't see, and I think it's unfair to sort of point at the industries that you're serving as if they're somehow different than the rest
Yeah.
of them. But I think that in construction and building management, a lot of those trades are often associated with less technology. They're using more so now, but I remember back like in '05, '06, '07, the technology being used was, maybe they were using a tablet to enter notes on a job site. Maybe they were
Yeah.
using, and that was pretty advanced tech if they were doing that. In fact, in a lot of cases, they had somebody to do the digital version of their yellow legal pads for the
Yeah.
the project that they were working on. But then fast forward, and I would argue probably like 2015, 2016 and on, we started seeing the applications that were crazy expensive, your Timberlines and
Yeah.
uh, tools like that, suddenly had cloud options that were a fraction of the cost, had easy customized fields and views that we didn't have in the quote dinosaur apps. And I think it was a picture that it showed me that it was actually across the board. It wasn't unique to construction or manufacturing. It was actually more of a shift in the way applications were being built. And so we would refer to the other players as the dinosaurs, the tech
Yeah.
dinosaurs, or where lots of tech debt was, built around like cumbersome databases and lots of infrastructure. But one thing that I think still exists today that was a problem on that turning point, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, is security wasn't the primary focus for building those applications.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, I mean, and we don't do a lot with like architecture firms. We don't have any architects. But I was at a peer group meeting last week, and one of the peers in there, they serve a lot of architects, so they do a lot of Autodesk, and they said,
Sure.
they got to update Autodesk. It takes hours and hours and hours, but they said they're coming out with 20 bug fixes like a day. I mean, I think they were exaggerating, but again, that's a giant application. It was built way before security was a thing, and and you can't just go in there and find all the security holes overnight, right? There's a lot of code, there's
Sure.
a lot of people involved. So yeah, I think that's absolutely, and in a lot of ways, the cloud applications aren't a lot better other than they're newer and they were built generally when security was more front and center, I think. So I think both places have the issues. But yeah,
Yeah.
some of these softwares were written, the underlying platform that they wrote it in isn't even secure. So
Or are there even programmers still around that are
right.
willing to write code for those platforms anymore?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I
Uh,
mean, you talk about, yeah, and I think the state of Illinois is one of them here where we're at is, a bunch of the tax system was written in, COBOL. It's like, yeah, it's pretty hard to find COBOL programmers anymore.
yeah, Snowball, COBOL, Fortran. There's a lot of the older languages that a lot of our existing infrastructure still resides on, and there are no quote easy fixes to solve those problems. But on the flip side, I think we're also, going back to I don't care about my data mindset. We're seeing applications getting built and privacy policies getting, shared where no one's asking questions like, but is this application secure? I know it's got single sign-on, but how hard is it to bypass the front door to get into the data that's just there?
Yeah.
Uh, you know, we've got a few minutes left. I'd be curious, as you approach new and existing clients with the knowledge that you have from a security standpoint, do you have any sort of like go or no go? So like prospective client, you're looking at onboarding them. They obviously like the opportunity to potentially work with you. Do you have any that are just flat out deal breakers when you go into a net new client?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest, binary tests is if they're, and we seem to find this pretty binary split. They're investors in technology and they're keeping up and they have new gear and they have some technology. They have an ERP system for their manufacturer, right? They're kind of cutting edge, so to speak. And then there's the people that are 10, 15 years behind. So we don't have a problem with you being 10 to 15 years behind if you're willing to catch up. So if we come in and we
Sure,
find a shop that's just, listen, you got a Windows 98 machine sitting here, just security problems all over the place. You have switches that are
sure,
15 years old. If you're willing to put the money and time in and let us get it right, we're happy to do that. I think it's a win-win,
sure,
right? It's good business for us. It gets them where they need to be. It's the people that are 10 years behind and don't want to put the investment in. That's just a giant risk for us, right? It's not a question of, like we talked about earlier, it's not a question of when they're going to have an incident. It's not a question of if, it's when. And we don't want to be there holding the bag when it happens. So it's hard enough to secure places when they're investing, when
sure.
they're not willing to do what they need to do from their side and they're not willing to let us kind of drive. Those are the opportunities that we have to walk away from because the risk is just too great these days that we don't want to carry that.
I would imagine there's also the in between prospects where the manufacturing floor has the CNC machines and the different devices running, to your point, Windows 98 or whatever it might be, and you don't necessarily care about the OS because, well, they're not on the internet, right? They're not
Yeah.
connected. And then you find out that they have matured because they have a new ERP software or
Yeah.
accounting package for running the job costings, and they did something like connect all of those devices together so that they could see it without going and physically touching it. And so they basically leapfrog, right? So they
Yeah.
15, 20-year old infrastructure, but then they added one app and an access point, and suddenly all of that is now
In
vulnerable and
play.
exposed.
Yeah.
Have you run into that hybrid one?
A little bit here and there. And I think that's we don't expect people to, like, you're not going to plunk down $100,000 tomorrow to bring everything up to speed. But if we can
Sure.
put you on a 3-year roadmap and you'll something that the owner will commit to, we're happy to do it over time. You find the most vulnerable, risky thing, get that out
Right.
first, right? So we're happy to put it on some sort of roadmap. It's the people that say, yeah, we're going to do it, and then 2 years in they haven't done
Yeah.
anything. That's a real problem.
And
But yeah, I
healthcare is
think
the same
that's.
way, right?
I'm sorry.
Well, I was just gonna say healthcare is kind of the same way, right? You've got a
Yeah.
multi-million dollar DICOM imaging machine or an MRI machine, and the software for it, is Windows XP or Windows 10 and not supported anymore. It's like, yeah, but the MRI machine works just fine, and you're
Yeah.
proposing something that's going to cost millions of dollars to replace because they can't put a $30 operating system to bring it into 2025.
Yeah, that we run into a lot, both. And we came out of the medical space. We did a lot in medical, and I think there is a very similarity there. The really, really, really expensive machines, whether it's a medical or manufacturing,
Sure,
and yeah, I can't just replace it. It's cost prohibitive. So then the question is, what do you do? And that's a tough place for them to be in. And
sure,
so that's our job to figure out how to mitigate it because okay, this has to be a Windows 98 machine.
yep,
Fine. We need to figure out how to get that segmented so it's not on the network with everything else. And when you got to do what you can to protect it. And that's just, that's part of our job to figure out those absolute we can't do. That's our job to figure
yeah.
out how to make it work.
I mean, the good news is there's not a lot of threat actors writing malware for Windows 98 anymore. So I mean, there
Yeah.
is that.
Yes. Eventually,
Well,
eventually it becomes a good security solution.
that's right. That's
Yeah.
right. So Jeff, we've got about a minute left on the show. Is there anything you want to share with the audience that's largely other MSPs, but shoot, they could be clients of MSPs as well?
Yeah, I think the two big things we talk about a lot are, take security seriously. And I know everyone gets tired of hearing that. Yeah, we know. But we see it, every day. Somebody's getting ransomware. It's just a thing that happens. So you gotta really put it front and center, and every decision you make needs to be security driven. And then I think the
They
second
take
thing
no
is that,
prisoners.
yeah, exactly. And I think the second thing is for clients of, there's a lot of MSPs out there. There's a lot of great MSPs. There's a lot of not so good. If you're stuck in a relationship with an MSP they're not getting it done or you're not happy, switching is not as bad as you think it is with the right group. So don't be stuck in a relationship that you really don't like. There's something better out there for you.
I think that's the quid pro quo, right? I think MSPs are starting to take that same mindset as well, where If the client is a bad fit, it's okay to say no. There's dollars somewhere else too.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. They're right for somebody. It's just a question of who.
That's right. All right. Well, Jeff, I appreciate you coming on the show. And for those of you listening, thanks and have a great week.
Good. Thanks for having me, Chris. That was great.